Imagine a world not just ancient, but alien. A world where the air hummed with the beating of leathery wings, where colossal footsteps shook the very ground beneath you, and where landscapes stretched, unbroken by human hands, for millions upon millions of years. This wasn't some distant galaxy or a fantastical realm from a storybook. This was Earth, our home 65 million years ago. A planet vibrant, terrifying, and breathtakingly alive, dominated by creatures that defy our wildest imagination. But what truly defined this lost era? What sights would have greeted your eyes? What sounds would have filled your ears? And what secrets does this primordial past still hold? Prepare to journey back in time, not just to observe, but to truly experience the world that was. If you're as fascinated by these ancient mysteries as we are, and you want to keep exploring the hidden depths of our planet's past, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of time travelers, and don't forget to share this video with anyone else who dreams of dinosaurs and forgotten worlds. Your support helps us unlock even more of Earth's incredible story. Chapter 1. The Planet Forged, A Violent Birth. Imagine for a moment, if you can, the sheer, unimaginable scale of time. We talk about millions of years, and it sounds grand, doesn't it? But to truly grasp 65 million years ago, we have to peel back layer after layer of Earth's history, like turning the pages of an ancient cosmic book. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, colossal convection currents churned in the mantle, like boiling soup in a pot. Well, 65 million years ago, the entire planet was arguably a more volatile place. As they drifted, new ocean currents began to form. Warmer temperatures generally mean more energy in the system, more biological productivity. They were also sediment traps, slowly accumulating layers of mud, sand, and the remains of countless marine organisms. The very composition of the atmosphere was different. With so much volcanic activity and different biological processes at play, the levels of gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide were not what they are today. Higher carbon dioxide levels contributed to that greenhouse effect, keeping the planet warm. And while oxygen levels varied, they were generally robust enough to support the incredible metabolism of the gigantic creatures that roamed the land. Think about it. A Tyrannosaurus rex needed a massive amount of oxygen to fuel its powerful muscles and maintain its incredible body temperature. The air itself was a key ingredient in their very existence. Over millions of years, these layers would compact and harden, eventually becoming the sedimentary rocks that today hold the fossilized secrets of this ancient world. And environmental stability, creating the perfect conditions for life to not just survive, but to truly flourish and diversify. It was a time of colossal forces at work, shaping mountains, dividing continents, and setting the stage for the most spectacular show of life Earth has ever seen. From the deep churning heart of the planet to the vast, shifting land masses and the atmospheric veil above, every element conspired to create a world utterly distinct from our own. A world where the stage was not just set, but dynamically, violently, and majestically built, ready for its most famous inhabitants to make their grand entrance. So when paleontologists dig into a cliff face in Kansas and find marine reptile fossils, they're not just finding bones. They're unearthing a piece of that ancient seaway, a testament to a time when what is now dry land was once a vast shallow ocean. And with no vast ice sheets locking up water, global sea levels were significantly higher than they are today. This meant vast, shallow inland seas, often called epimeric seas, spread across continental interiors. Picture much of central North America covered by the western interior seaway, a massive body of water stretching from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. This seaway wasn't just a watery expanse. It was a vibrant marine ecosystem in itself, teeming with its own unique array of colossal predators and strange, beautiful fish. It literally divided a continent in two, shaping the evolution of terrestrial life on either side. These currents act like massive conveyor belts, distributing heat and moisture around the planet. Think of how the Gulf Stream warms parts of Europe today. In the late Cretaceous, These newly established currents were helping to create a surprisingly warm and stable global climate. There were no polar ice caps like we have today. The poles were instead covered in lush forests, a stark contrast to their frozen silence now. Imagine palm trees swaying near the North Pole, or dense fern forests thriving in Antarctica. It sounds like something out of science fiction, doesn't it? But it was very real. Volcanoes weren't just isolated peaks. They were often chains, spewing ash and lava, reshaping landscapes, and injecting colossal amounts of gases into the atmosphere. These weren't mere eruptions. They were events that could alter global climates, sometimes cooling the planet by blocking sunlight with ash, sometimes warming it with greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. Imagine waking up to skies perpetually dimmed by volcanic haze, the air thick with the scent of sulfur. This wasn't just a backdrop. It was an active participant in the drama of life. These currents dragged and pushed the massive tectonic plates that form the Earth's surface, causing continents to collide, rip apart, and drift across the globe at speeds imperceptible to us, yet profound over geological timescales. This wasn't just idle wandering. It was the very engine of planetary change. When these plates crashed, mountains rose, like the nascent Rockies taking shape in North America. When they pulled apart, new oceans formed, and vast rifts bled molten rock from the planet's core. Because before the dinosaurs could truly dominate, before the skies could teem with winged reptiles, and before the oceans became hunting grounds for leviathans, the stage itself had to be set. And that stage, our very planet, was forged in a fiery, violent, and utterly spectacular birth. What we often forget is that Earth is a living, breathing entity, constantly shifting and evolving beneath our feet. We stand on solid ground today, but 65 million years ago, the continents were in very different places. If you could have floated in space and looked down, the familiar outlines of our modern world wouldn't have been there. North America was still connected to Eurasia in a supercontinent called Laurasia, though it was slowly, inexorably pulling apart. South America, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and India were all part of a southern supercontinent called Gondwana, which had already begun its own epic breakup. Think of it like a giant, slow-motion ballet of landmasses, driven by forces so immense they humble our human understanding. Consider the Pacific Ring of Fire today, a horseshoe of intense volcanic activity and earthquakes. One of the most significant changes happening during this period, the late Cretaceous, was the continued separation of the continents. This warmth wasn't just a comfort, it was a fundamental driver of life. These inland seas were also crucial for moderating global temperatures, acting like giant thermal blankets, absorbing and radiating heat. But it wasn't just the movement of continents or the formation of inland seas that defined this era. This era, the late Cretaceous, was a period of sustained geological activity. Chapter 2, Lush Landscapes, Flora of the Dinosaur Age. When we picture the age of dinosaurs, our minds almost immediately jump to the towering beasts themselves, the roaring T-Rex, the lumbering Brachiosaurus, the horned Triceratops. And rightly so, they are incredibly captivating. But pause for a moment. While some familiar elements were present, the overall vibe was distinctly primordial. Imagine vast, sprawling fern plains stretching to the horizon, interrupted by towering ancient trees that looked nothing like our modern oaks or maples. This was a world dominated by a mix of very old plant lineages and some relatively new arrivals that were just beginning their meteoric rise. They too were common and widespread, contributing to the rich tapestry of the forest. Horsetails, ancient relatives of modern scouring rushes, would have formed dense thickets in damp, marshy areas, providing cover and food for smaller creatures. They could produce fruits, which were a fantastic way to package seeds for dispersal by animals. They could also form complex relationships with pollinators, like insects, leading to a coevolutionary dance that supercharged biodiversity. Rainfall was abundant in many regions, fueling the growth of vast forests and swamps. See the towering conifers against a hazy, humid sky, the sprawling fields of cycads and ferns. and the occasional burst of color from an early flowering plant. Understand that this verdant, vibrant world wasn't just a passive stage. It was an active participant in the drama of the dinosaurs, shaping their lives, dictating their movements, and providing the very fuel for their existence. The lush landscapes of 65 million years ago were not merely scenery. They were the lungs of a lost world, breathing life into an era unlike any other. Picture expansive coastal lowlands, dense with mangrove-like trees, and filled with slow-moving rivers and lakes. These swampy regions would have been prime real estate for many types of dinosaurs, offering both food and water as well as refuge. The sheer biomass generated by these plants was staggering, providing the energy base for an entire planet of giants. Imagine the first brightly colored flowers attracting the first bees, a partnership that would reshape the botanical world forever. These early flowering plants might not have been as dominant in terms of sheer biomass as the conifers or cycads, but they were rapidly spreading, especially in more open, disturbed habitats and along river systems. Ferns, in their myriad forms, would have carpeted the forest floor and lined riverbanks, creating lush green undergrowth. If you were a small, scurrying mammal, these ferny carpets would have been your safe haven, your hunting ground for insects, and your escape route from larger predators. And consider the stage upon which these magnificent creatures played out their lives. What did they eat? Where did they hide? Today, angiosperms are everywhere. They give us fruits, vegetables, grains, and most of the beautiful flowers we adore. In the late Cretaceous, they were still relatively new on the evolutionary scene, but they were diversifying at an astonishing rate. What provided the very air they breathed and the ground they walked upon? The answer lies in the incredible, diverse, and often alien-looking plant life that carpeted Earth 65 million years ago, and new types of leaves to a largely green and brown landscape. These new food sources, often softer and more nutrient-rich than the tough foliage of conifers and cycads, likely spurred the evolution of new types of herbivorous dinosaurs and other creatures who could exploit them. Perhaps a duck-billed hadrosaur, with its specialized dental battery, was particularly adept at processing these new softer plants. This botanical revolution wasn't just pretty. It was a fundamental shift in the food web. This wasn't your grandmother's garden, nor was it anything like the forest you hike through today. Let's start with the old guard. Conifers, those cone-bearing trees like pines, spruces, and cedars, were already ancient by the late Cretaceous. They had been around for millions of years, forming vast forests, especially in the higher latitudes. Think of colossal redwoods, but even more ancient, creating a dense, often dark canopy that would have provided shelter and foraging grounds for many dinosaurs. These weren't just decorative. They were the backbone of many ecosystems, providing wood, shelter, and a steady food source for herbivorous dinosaurs who could handle their tough, resinous needles and cones. Imagine a long-necked sauropod, perhaps an Alamosaurus, stretching its neck to nibble on the highest branches of a colossal conifer, its sheer size a testament to the abundant food source. Alongside the conifers, we would have seen cycads. If you've ever visited a botanical garden, you might have seen these plants. They look like a cross between a palm tree and a fern with a sturdy, often short trunk, topped by a crown of stiff, leathery leaves. In the Cretaceous, cycads were incredibly diverse and widespread, forming a significant component of the understory in many forests and even dominating open plains in some areas. Their tough leaves and often robust cones would have been a staple for many medium-sized herbivores. Picture a triceratops calmly munching its way through a field of cycads, its powerful beak shearing off the tough fronds. Then there were the ginkgos, those living fossils with their distinctive fan-shaped leaves. But here's where it gets truly interesting. While these ancient lineages dominated, a revolutionary new group of plants was rapidly gaining ground, the angiosperms or flowering plants. Why was this such a game changer? Well, flowering plants offered something unique. Think of it. The first ancient magnolias or sycamores began to emerge, adding splashes of color. The global climate of the late Cretaceous, as we discussed, was generally warm and wet, fostering incredibly lush and productive environments. So the next time you picture a T-Rex stalking its prey, try to visualize the backdrop. Chapter 3: Kings of the Land, Iconic Dinosaurs. Having explored the planet's dynamic geology and the incredible plant life that covered it, it's finally time to introduce the stars of the show. When we think of dinosaurs, certain images immediately leap to mind, don't they? Forget everything you think you know from the movies for a moment, and let's talk about the real deal. Imagine that, a creature that could not only see you from a distance, but also literally smell fear in the air. If T-Rex was the ultimate predator, Triceratops was the ultimate tank. At about 30 feet long and weighing up to 6 tons, this herbivore was no easy meal. Its most striking features were its enormous bony frill, a shield of bone that could be used for defense or display, and its 3 formidable horns, 2 long ones above its eyes and a shorter one on its snout. The armored dinosaurs, like the Ankylosaurs, were literally walking fortresses. Ankylosaurus itself was a low-slung, heavily armored tank, covered from head to tail in bony plates and spikes, with a massive bone club at the end of its tail. Imagine trying to bite through that. Their defense was their survival strategy, and while slow, they were nearly impregnable from above. Each played a crucial role in its ecosystem, from the grazers meticulously shaping the vegetation to the predators keeping herbivore populations in check. Their lives were a constant ballet of survival, a testament to the power of evolution in a world untouched by human presence. They were not just monstrous beasts. They were complex, living animals, each perfectly adapted to their environment, ruling the land with an unchallenged authority that spanned millions of years. These weren't just for show. They were serious weapons. Pachycephalosaurus had a dome of solid bone up to 10 inches thick on its head, while the truly bird-like raptors like Velociraptor were more prominent in earlier periods and often over-dramatized in films. Dinosaurs like Daguerreotypter or the Dromaeosaurids were still present. These were agile, intelligent hunters, often working in packs, equipped with sharp claws and serrated teeth, posing a threat to smaller or younger dinosaurs. They were the stealthy, cunning assassins of the late Cretaceous, relying on speed and coordination rather than brute force. Was it for headbutting rivals in territorial or mating disputes, like bighorn sheep, or was it purely for display? Scientists still debate, but it certainly suggests a very tough skull and perhaps some dramatic ancient rituals. Imagine a 9-ton beast charging, head down, horns pointed directly at its attacker. That's a force to be reckoned with, even for a T-Rex. Its massive legs, while built for power, also suggest it was more of an endurance hunter or a masterful ambusher rather than a high-speed sprinter. They were grazers, using their strong, parrot-like beaks to shear off tough vegetation, likely the cycads and ferns we discussed earlier. These incredibly successful herbivores were the cows of the Cretaceous, abundant and diverse. Many species had hollow crests on their heads that they likely used to make unique calls, perhaps for communicating within their herds, attracting mates, or even warning of danger. Imagine the vast honking calls of an Edmontosaurus herd echoing across a primordial swamp. They moved in large groups, offering safety in numbers, and there's even evidence of communal nesting sites, suggesting they care for their young. They were a vital part of the food chain, a primary food source for many large predators, and their sheer numbers underscore the abundance of plant life in the late Cretaceous. Species like Edmontosaurus could reach lengths of 40 feet and weigh many tons. Their most remarkable feature was their mouth, a broad, flat beak at the front for clipping vegetation, followed by hundreds of self-replacing teeth arranged in grinding batteries. These dental batteries were like a constantly regenerating food processor, perfectly adapted for pulverizing tough plant matter. Herds of Triceratops would have been a common sight across the plains of what is now North America. Their collective bulk and defensive formations a formidable deterrent to any predator. The interplay between T-Rex and Triceratops is one of the most iconic predator-prey relationships in all of paleontology, a true ancient showdown. It wasn't always chasing down its prey at full gallop. Sometimes the most effective predator is the one that knows how to wait, how to track, and how to deliver a devastating surprise attack. Was it a pure predator, or did it scavenge too? The debate rages on among scientists, but the truth is, a creature that powerful likely didn't pass up an easy meal, whether it was fresh kill or a carcass. It was simply a dominant force in its ecosystem. T-Rex wasn't just a giant lizard. It was a marvel of evolution, a finely tuned apex predator. Standing up to 40 feet long and weighing in at around 9 tons. That's heavier than a school bus. It was a walking, breathing, flesh-eating tank. Its most famous feature, of course, was its skull. Nearly 5 feet long, packed with some of the largest teeth of any meat-eating dinosaur, serrated like steak. Knives and capable of delivering a bite force estimated to be the strongest of any terrestrial animal ever. Powerful enough to crush bone. Colossal predators with bone-crushing jaws, magnificent herbivores with defensive frills, and long-necked titans that defy gravity. These are the iconic dinosaurs, the true kings and queens of the late Cretaceous land. And 65 million years ago, they reigned supreme across every continent. Let's start with the undisputed heavyweight champion, the creature whose name alone inspires awe and a hint of terror, Tyrannosaurus rex. But T-Rex wasn't just about brute force. Recent research suggests it had remarkably good eyesight and an incredible sense of smell, perhaps even better than the bloodhounds. Now, who would challenge such a titan? Perhaps his most famous adversary, the magnificent Triceratops horridus. Triceratops was a member of the Ceratopsian family, a group known for their elaborate frills and horns. But the late Cretaceous wasn't just about these two superstars. Consider the hadrosaurs, often called duck-billed dinosaurs. Hadrosaurs were also fascinating for their social behaviors. Beyond the well-known, there were other fascinating land dwellers. Then there were the pachycephalosaurs, the thick-headed lizards, with their famously domed skulls. And let's not forget the smaller, but no less fearsome theropods, the raptors. The world of 65 million years ago was a vibrant, dynamic tapestry of life, dominated by these incredible land giants. Chapter 4: Skysaurs and Ocean Giants. While the ground trembled under the weight of colossal dinosaurs, two other realms of the late Cretaceous world were equally dominated by spectacular, often terrifying, reptiles, the vast boundless skies, and the deep mysterious oceans. These were not dinosaurs, mind you, but their cousins, evolution's other grand experiments in scale and power. Often mistakenly called flying dinosaurs, pterosaurs were actually a distinct group of flying reptiles. And in the late Cretaceous, one genus in particular stood head and shoulders, or rather, wings and beak, above the rest, Quetzalcoatlus northrop. These majestic creatures likely glided on thermals, effortlessly covering vast distances, their silhouettes casting fleeting shadows over the lush forests and inland seas below. Forget our modern sharks and whales for a moment. The marine reptiles of the late Cretaceous were a league of their own. Dominating these waters were the Mosasaurs. These weren't dinosaurs either, but incredibly successful marine lizards, distant relatives of modern monitor lizards and snakes. They were efficient hunters, ambushing prey or pursuing it with bursts of speed. Think of them as the ultimate marine ambush predators, patrolling the vast western interior seaway we talked about earlier, their eyes scanning for any ripple on the surface. They teemed with ammonites, nautiloids, various types of sharks, and countless fish, forming a rich and complex marine ecosystem. These were not gentle landscapes. They were realms of majestic flight and powerful dives, where the struggle for survival played out on scales that dwarf our modern world. To imagine this lost era fully, we must picture not just the ground beneath our feet, but the vast, untamed expanses above and below, each teeming with its own incredible, often terrifying wonders. But it was the Mosasaurs, with their reptilian ferocity and immense size, that truly ruled these underwater kingdoms. To be swimming in those waters would have been to be truly at the mercy of giants, and they were, to put it mildly, terrifying. They were the undisputed airborne rulers. filling an ecological niche that birds wouldn't fully exploit until after the pterosaurs' demise. Their jaws were lined with rows of sharp, conical teeth, designed for grasping and crushing. And they even had a second set of teeth in the roof of their mouth, a feature that helped them hold on to struggling prey. Mosasaurus itself was the apex predator of the ancient seas, a true leviathan. Its diet included fish, ammonites, sharks, and even other mosasaurs. There is fossil evidence of mosasaur bones with tooth marks from other mosasaurs, a chilling reminder of just how brutal these ancient oceans could be. Imagine a creature with a wingspan comparable to a small airplane, some estimates putting it at over 30 to 36 feet. That's bigger than a giraffe is tall, with wings made of leathery membranes stretched between a dramatically elongated fourth finger and its body. While ichthyosaurs, the fish lizards with their dolphin-like bodies, were in decline by the late Cretaceous, some forms persisted. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks and four large flippers, were still present, though mosasaurs had largely taken over the apex predator role. Some plesiosaurs, like Elasmosaurus, had incredibly long necks, almost half their body length, with small heads. They likely snaked their necks through schools of fish, snapping them up with rows of needle-sharp teeth. Others, like the short-necked pliosaurs, were robust, powerful predators in their own right, though their heyday was earlier in the Mesozoic. If you thought T-Rex was impressive, just wait until you meet the kings of the air and the leviathans of the deep. Its body was surprisingly light for its size, with hollow bones and a sophisticated respiratory system, much like birds. Despite its massive wingspan, its weight was probably only around 200 to 250 kilograms. It had a long, pointed, toothless beak and a ridiculously long neck, almost half its total length. What did such a colossal flyer eat? Scientists are still piecing this together, but the most accepted theory suggests it was a terrestrial stalker, walking on all fours with its wings folded, much like a giant stork, snatching up small dinosaurs, lizards, or even juvenile crocodilians from the ground or shallow water. Imagine this enormous creature unfolding its wings and launching itself into the sky, a truly awe-inspiring sight. A living testament to the extremes of evolution. It wasn't just a flyer. It was an airborne predator or scavenger, surveying its kingdom from impossible heights. Let's start with the undisputed masters of the Mesozoic skies, the pterosaurs. Picture this, a quetzalcoatlus soaring silently high above the prehistoric landscape. Other pterosaurs would have filled the skies too, perhaps smaller, more agile fish-eaters like Pteranodon, with its distinctive cranial crest. Now, let's take a plunge into the prehistoric oceans. Imagine an animal that could grow up to 50 feet long, with a sleek, hydrodynamic body, powerful paddle-like limbs, and a propulsive, shark-like tail. These creatures were incredibly adaptable, living in shallow coastal waters and deeper open seas. Alongside the mosasaurs, though less dominant in the late Cretaceous, were the last of the plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs. The oceans of 65 million years ago were not just home to these giant reptiles. So, while the land belonged to the dinosaurs, the skies and oceans were territories forged by evolution for other spectacular reptilian giants. Chapter 5, Beyond the Giants, Smaller Inhabitants. When we talk about the age of dinosaurs, the sheer scale of the dominant creatures often overshadows everything else. We picture T-Rex and Triceratops, and our imaginations are rightfully captured by their immense power and presence. But just like in our world today, no ecosystem is composed solely of apex predators and mega herbivores. They belong to various groups, including multituberculates and early marsupials and placentals. In fact, birds are dinosaurs, the direct descendants of avian dinosaurs that survived the extinction event. But 65 million years ago, the avian world was a very different place. Many of the birds were more primitive than those we see today, often still retaining teeth in their beaks and claws on their wings. While not yet reaching the immense sizes of some modern constrictors, these reptiles were already diversifying, with various predatory and insectivorous forms. Insects were absolutely everywhere, just as they are today. Every single one played a role, no matter how humble. They were the constant background noise, the silent machinery, the crucial stepping stones in the food chain that allowed the giants to exist. They demonstrate that while the dinosaurs dominated in size and power, life itself was far more diverse and resilient than we often give it credit for. And it was among these smaller, often overlooked survivors that the seeds of our own future lay hidden. Dragonflies with wingspans larger than your hand would have zipped through the air. Beetles, crickets, grasshoppers, ants, and early bees would have filled every conceivable ecological niche. They were the primary decomposers, the pollinators of those burgeoning flowering plants, and a fundamental food source for countless other creatures, from small mammals and birds to juvenile dinosaurs. Without them, the intricate food webs would have collapsed. Imagine the constant hum of ancient insect life, a low buzz underlying all the other sounds of the prehistoric world. Crocodilians, too, were widespread and successful, with many different species inhabiting the rivers and coastal areas. Some were smaller, more agile hunters, while others were massive, powerful predators, likely competing with or preying on juvenile dinosaurs when the opportunity arose. Imagine a fearsome ancient crocodile, its eyes just breaking the surface of a murky swamp, waiting for an unwary creature to approach the water's edge. They ranged in size and lifestyle, from small, agile perching birds to larger, wading birds and even diving species. They were probably insectivores, omnivores, or small plant eaters, nibbling on seeds, fruits, insects, and worms. They filled many of the ecological roles that modern birds do today, foraging for insects, seeds, and small vertebrates. Imagine the sounds of a prehistoric forest not just filled with the roars and trumpeting of dinosaurs, but also the chirps, squawks, and calls of these ancient birds flitting through the branches. They were a vital part of the aerial ecosystem, sharing the skies with pterosaurs and representing a rapidly diversifying branch of the dinosaur family tree. Imagine these tiny, furry creatures darting through the undergrowth at night, their keen senses of smell and hearing helping them navigate a world dominated by giants. Their moist skin and dependence on water kept them tied to these lush human habitats. They would have fed on insects and smaller invertebrates, and in turn provided food for larger predators like small dinosaurs, birds, or snakes. Their croaks and splashes would have been a constant soundtrack to the wetland ecosystems. They would have built burrows, climbed trees, and generally kept a low profile to avoid becoming a snack for a passing theropod. While they weren't commanding the landscapes, their persistence, adaptability, and diversity were quietly profound. They represented the future, a lineage poised to explode in diversity once the ecological playing field was leveled. Far from it. The world of 65 million years ago was teeming with a vast, vibrant array of smaller creatures, the mammals, birds, amphibians, insects, and countless invertebrates that formed the essential, intricate web of life. These often overlooked inhabitants were the unsung heroes of the Cretaceous, filling crucial niches, providing food for the giants, and quietly, steadily laying the groundwork for the future. Let's start with the mammals. It's a common misconception that mammals only rose to prominence after the dinosaurs disappeared. In reality, mammals have been around for a very long time, evolving alongside dinosaurs for tens of millions of years. However, in the late Cretaceous, they were generally small, often nocturnal, and mostly lived in the shadows of their reptilian overlords. Think of them as the tiny, scurrying underdogs of the ecosystem. Most Cretaceous mammals were no bigger than a modern-day rat or shrew, perhaps a badger or a cat at their very largest. Then there were the birds. Yes, birds were absolutely present in the late Cretaceous. One notable group was the enantiomyths, or opposite birds, which were incredibly diverse and widespread. Amphibians too played their part. Frogs, salamanders, and early caecilians would have thrived in the abundant freshwater environments, the swamps, rivers, and lakes. And speaking of snakes, early snakes and lizards were also present, slithering through the undergrowth or basking on sun-warmed rocks. But arguably the most diverse and numerous inhabitants of all were the insects. These smaller creatures highlight the sheer complexity and interconnectedness of the Cretaceous ecosystems. Chapter 6: Daily Life of a Dinosaur, A Day in the Cretaceous. So far, we've talked about the immense forces that shaped the planet, the incredible plants that covered it, and the awe-inspiring creatures that called it home. But what was it actually like to be a dinosaur 65 million years ago? What did their days entail? Beyond the dramatic hunts and the epic battles, what were the mundane, the routine, the essential elements of their daily lives? Of course, we can't truly know the thoughts or feelings of a creature long extinct, but do fossil evidence trace fossils like footprints and bite marks? Perhaps it had eaten recently, a full belly leading to sluggish movements. High in the branches of a conifer, a small bird-like dinosaur, perhaps a member of the Enantiornithus, might be preening its feathers, warming itself in the morning sun. Its day would be a constant search for food, insects picked from bark, seeds gleaned from cones, or maybe even a tiny lizard snatched from the leaves. It would be nimble, constantly aware of larger predators, the soaring pterosaurs above or the lurking theropods below. Its day might involve foraging for decaying plant matter, escaping the snapping jaws of a small lizard, or seeking a mate. The air would thicken with humidity, and the sounds of the forest would shift, the buzzing of insects becoming more prominent, the calls of birds changing. Perhaps a sudden, torrential downpour would sweep across the landscape, turning dusty trails into muddy streams, providing vital water but also disrupting activity. It wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in a world of unimaginable scale and power. Each sunrise brought new challenges and opportunities, a rhythm of life that played out for millions of years, largely unchanged, until that fateful day. The sheer density of insect life meant that every patch of ground, every leaf, every patch of air was a bustling metropolis of tiny lives, each playing its role in decomposition, pollination, and serving as food for a myriad of creatures. Its calls would punctuate the forest air, communicating with mates or warning of danger. Or maybe it was hungry, its massive stomach rumbling, driving it to seek out prey. The activity patterns might shift again. Nocturnal creatures, like many of the small mammals, would begin to stir, their senses heightened as the world grew darker. The immense, echoing calls of the larger dinosaurs might quiet down, replaced by the rustling of leaves, the chirping of crickets, and the distant calls of owls or other nocturnal birds. T-Rex might not have been an early bird in the sense of always hunting at dawn. Its large eyes, with a surprising degree of binocular vision, and its incredible sense of smell, would have made it effective in various light conditions, including twilight. Its day might involve patrolling its territory, perhaps following the scent trails of a herbivore herd, or investigating the calls of opportunistic scavengers that might lead it to a carcass. It's a game of patience and immense power. When it did encounter prey, the hunt would be short and explosive, a burst of speed, a bone-shattering bite, followed by a period of rest and digestion, often near the kill site, guarding its hard-won meal from smaller scavengers. In our understanding of modern ecosystems, we can paint a surprisingly vivid picture of a typical day in the Cretaceous. Let's imagine for a moment a dawn breaking over a lush, humid late Cretaceous landscape in what is now North America. It might have spent the night in the water, maintaining its body temperature. A young Pterosaurolophus, barely a few feet long, would stick close to its parents in a large herd of hadrosaurs. Its days would involve learning to forage, practicing calls with its developing crest, and constantly being on the lookout for danger. Young dinosaurs grew incredibly fast, required massive amounts of food. Their vulnerability meant they were prime targets for smaller predators, and even larger ones when their parents were vigilant. The constant threat would have made their lives a daily trial of survival. And now it waits for an unwary fish to swim by or a thirsty, smaller dinosaur to approach the riverbank. Its life is a cycle of ambush, a quick, powerful lunge, followed by a period of slow digestion. The air is warm, thick with the scent of damp earth, ferns, and perhaps the musky odor of ancient animals. The first rays of the sun filter through the dense canopy of conifers and cycads, dappling the forest floor. For a herd of Triceratops, the day might begin slowly. Having spent the night huddled together for safety, perhaps near a watering hole, they would stir, their massive bodies shifting. The juveniles, still small enough to be vulnerable, might stay close to their mothers, playfully nudging or nipping at their legs. The adults would begin to graze, their powerful beaks clipping off tough cycad fronds and ferns, their dental batteries grinding the fibrous plant matter into a digestible pulp. It's a continuous process for such large herbivores. They need to consume enormous quantities of food to fuel their immense bodies. They move slowly across the landscape, a living lawnmower crew, leaving a swath of crop vegetation in their wake. Their frills, perhaps dull brown in the cool morning, might begin to flush with color as blood rushed to them in the warmer sun, a silent signal of health or status within the herd. They'd always be alert, their eyes and ears constantly scanning for any sign of danger, particularly as the day warmed and predators became more active. Meanwhile, a solitary Tyrannosaurus rex might be waking from a restless night. Now, shift your perspective to a smaller creature. In a nearby river, a crocodilian, ancient and patient, would lie submerged, only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. Its day is a waiting game. Consider the young. Juvenile dinosaurs of all species had a far more precarious existence. For an insect, say a large beetle scuttling across the forest floor, life would be a miniature epic. As the day progressed, the heat would build, perhaps driving some of the larger animals to seek shade or wallow in muddy pools to cool down. As evening approached, the light would soften, casting long, dramatic shadows. The daily life of a dinosaur was a constant dance with nature. The search for food, the avoidance of predators, the social interactions within their species, the endless adaptation to a dynamic environment. Chapter 7. Climate and Catastrophe. Preparing for Change. We've explored the vibrant life of the late Cretaceous, the daily routines of its colossal inhabitants, and the lush, dynamic landscapes they called home. It might seem, from our distant perspective, that this world, dominated by dinosaurs for so many millions of years, was an eternal, unchanging paradise. But beneath the veneer of stability, subtle shifts were occurring, and the planet itself was, in a sense, preparing for an unimaginable change. There were cycles, gradual changes, and regional variations. While volcanism was a constant throughout the Mesozoic, some geological evidence suggests an uptick in massive eruptions towards the end of the Cretaceous. These continuous eruptions weren't necessarily immediate killers for the dinosaurs, but they could have put stress on plant life, disrupted weather patterns. This might have altered global heat distribution, potentially leading to regional cooling or warming and affecting rainfall patterns. The formation of new mountain ranges through tectonic collisions could also influence local climates by creating rain shadows or altering wind currents. These were slow, inexorable changes measured in millions of years, but over time, they could shift the balance of power in ecosystems, favoring some species over others. There were long-term environmental trends and pressures that, while not immediately fatal, might have primed the Earth's ecosystems for a more dramatic shock. They set the stage for an event so sudden, so violent, and so globally devastating that it would rewrite the story of life on Earth in a single terrifying day. The climate might have been changing, volcanoes might have been rumbling, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared the Earth and its inhabitants for what was about to descend from the heavens. Imagine a complex machine running for millions of years, with a few gears starting to show some wear, a few minor creaks and groans. It's still running, but perhaps not quite as smoothly, not quite as resiliently. This wasn't a sudden decline. Dinosaurs were still incredibly diverse and successful right up to the very end. But these background environmental shifts might have meant that when the true catastrophe struck, the ecosystems were just a little less robust, a little less capable of absorbing the blow, and potentially made water sources more acidic, subtly altering the very foundation of the food web. While generally high, periods of regression would expose vast areas of continental shelf, dramatically altering coastal habitats and potentially stressing marine life. A fall in sea level can also reduce the area of shallow inland seas, which were such productive ecosystems for many marine reptiles and invertebrates. These changes, though seemingly subtle on a global scale, could have profoundly impacted coastal dinosaur populations and the marine food chains that supported some of the larger sky-soaring pterosaurs and mosasaurs. A prolonged period of volcanic activity could have led to a gradual climate change, perhaps making some regions drier or experiencing more extreme temperature swings. As flowering plants continue to diversify and spread, they may have outcompeted some of the older plant groups like cycads and conifers in certain areas. This botanical shift, while a sign of evolutionary success for angiosperms, could have posed challenges for herbivorous dinosaurs that were highly specialized in feeding on older plant types. It's a natural evolutionary process, but it meant that the food sources for some mega herbivores were subtly changing. This isn't a sudden catastrophe, but a slow grinding pressure on the system, like turning up the heat on a frog slowly so it doesn't notice. Think of the Deccan traps in India, for example. This was a vast volcanic province that erupted episodically over hundreds of thousands of years, potentially releasing colossal amounts of gases, like carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, as we know, can lead to global warming, while sulfur dioxide can create aerosols that reflect sunlight, leading to cooling. The interplay of these gases could have caused significant, albeit slower, fluctuations in global temperatures and atmospheric chemistry. Towards the very end of the Cretaceous, in the last few million years leading up to the fateful event, scientists have found evidence of some environmental stressors already at play. These weren't catastrophic on their own, but they might have weakened ecosystems, making them more vulnerable to a sudden, devastating shock. The stage was being set, not just for a dramatic end, but for a new beginning. For much of the late Cretaceous, as we discussed, the Earth enjoyed a remarkably warm and stable climate. There were no polar ice caps, sea levels were high, and lush vegetation extended closer to the poles than it does today. This persistent warmth fostered immense biodiversity and supported the sheer biomass of gigantic dinosaurs. It was a greenhouse world, certainly, but one that seemed for a long time to offer ideal conditions for reptilian life. However, even in such a stable period, the Earth's climate is never truly static. One significant factor was continued widespread volcanic activity. Imagine skies occasionally hazy with volcanic ash, distant rumbles shaking the ground, and the air carrying the faint scent of sulfur. Another factor was the ongoing continental drift. As continents continued to separate, new ocean currents formed and old ones changed. Furthermore, there's evidence that global sea levels were fluctuating in the last few million years of the Cretaceous. Even the evolution of plants played a role. So, by 65 million years ago, the planet wasn't in crisis, but it wasn't static either. This brings us to the precipice of the unimaginable. These slow-burning changes, these subtle environmental pressures, were mere prologue. Chapter 8, The Impact, the day the world changed. We've talked about the steady pulse of prehistoric life, the towering giants, the hidden scurriers, and the subtle environmental shifts that were a constant, slow-motion ballet over millions of years. Perhaps a Triceratops herd is grazing peacefully, a T-Rex is napping in the shade, and Pterosaurs are soaring lazily on thermals. The sky above is blue, perhaps with a few fluffy clouds. The asteroid slammed into the shallow waters off the Yucatan Peninsula, in what is now Mexico, with the force of billions of atomic bombs. The impact site itself would have been transformed into a monstrous, transient cavity, dozens of miles wide and deep, pushing Earth's crust aside, briefly exposing the mantle below. The ground would have liquefied, flowing like a viscous soup, before sloshing back in on itself, forming a permanent crater more than 100 miles across, the Chicxulub crater, now mostly hidden beneath sediment and ocean. The heat from the re-entering ejecta would have been intense enough to cook any unprotected animal alive. The sheer scale of destruction within the first few hours and days was incomprehensible, a violence unparalleled in Earth's recent geological history. The sky, once blue, would have turned black with ash and soot, signaling not just the death of countless creatures, but the dawn of a new, terrifying reality. The dinosaurs' reign, which had lasted for 165 million years, was brought to an abrupt and spectacular end, not by slow decline, but by a sudden, violent punctuation mark from space. Dinosaurs in regions far from the impact site, who had survived the initial earthquake and tsunamis, would have faced a sudden, terrifying inferno, a rain of fire from the heavens. Animals smart enough to burrow, or those submerged in deep water, might have survived this initial heat pulse, but their ordeal was far from over. Think about that for a second. Billions of atomic bombs. The impact generated an earthquake of unimaginable magnitude, perhaps equivalent to a magnitude 11 or 12. A seismic wave that would have rippled through the entire planet, causing landslides and tsunamis across continents. Speaking of tsunamis, the impact into the ocean created an immediate, colossal wall of water, perhaps hundreds of feet high, that would have radiated outwards, crashing into coastlines across the Americas within hours. Imagine waves taller than skyscrapers, slamming into coastal forests, sweeping away everything in their path. Evidence of these ancient tsunamis is found today in geological layers, preserving the chaotic deposits of sand and debris they left behind. The energy release was equivalent to 100 teratons of TNT. This wasn't just dust. It was molten rock, scorching debris, falling back like a terrifying planet-wide hail of fire. As these superheated particles re-entered the atmosphere, they would have heated the air to incredibly high temperatures, essentially turning the sky into a gigantic convection oven. This thermal pulse would have been short-lived but devastating. Anything exposed would have burst into flames. Forests across vast regions, perhaps even entire continents, would have spontaneously ignited, creating massive wildfires that blackened the skies with smoke and soot. To put that in perspective, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated by humanity was about 50 megatons. This was millions of times more powerful. And then, without warning, a new light appears, growing rapidly, a searing pinpoint of brilliance. It's not a star. It's not the sun. It's an object, a celestial wanderer, perhaps 6 to 9 miles wide, roughly the size of Mount Everest, hurtling towards Earth at an incomprehensible speed of tens of thousands of miles per hour. This was the Chicxulub impactor, likely an asteroid or a comet on a collision course with our planet. But 65 million years ago, all of that changed in an instant. Not gradually, not subtly, but in a single terrifying, unimaginable moment that shattered the very fabric of the world. This was the day the Earth fundamentally changed, not by the slow grind of plate tectonics, but by an unwelcome visitor from the cold, dark depths of space. Imagine the quiet hum of a typical late Cretaceous day. The final moments before impact would have been unimaginable. The atmosphere itself would have begun to compress and superheat, creating a shock wave that would have dwarfed any explosion in human history. The air would have turned to plasma, a blinding flash visible for thousands of miles, momentarily making the sun itself seem dim. This wasn't just a meteor shower. It was an incoming planet killer. And then, the impact. The immediate aftermath was cataclysmic beyond description. The asteroid vaporized instantly, creating an enormous fireball that would have expanded outwards, incinerating everything within hundreds of miles. But the devastation didn't stop there. Even more terrifying, immense amounts of superheated rock and ejecta, pulverized material from the impact site, were blasted upwards, far beyond the atmosphere, only to rain back down across the entire globe. This wasn't just a local disaster. It was a global incinerator. The immediate consequences of the impact were horrifyingly swift and widespread. Immediate vaporization, continent-shaking earthquakes, monstrous tsunamis, and a global thermal pulse that ignited widespread wildfires. Chapter 9. The Long Twilight. Aftermath and Extinction. The immediate, mind-bending violence of the asteroid impact was over in moments. The searing flash, the ground liquefying, the monstrous tsunamis, the rain of fire igniting global wildfires. That was the shockwave. The skies would have been choked, not just from the smoke of continent-wide wildfires, but from pulverized rock, dust, and sulfur aerosols blasted into the stratosphere by the sheer force of the collision. This fine particulate matter, lofted high above the weather systems, would have acted like a colossal planet-wide blanket, blocking out the sun. No plant eaters, no meat eaters. The food web, so intricately woven over millions of years, began to unravel with terrifying speed. The asteroid impact also injected colossal amounts of sulfur-rich rock vapor into the atmosphere. This sulfur would have combined with water vapor to form sulfuric acid aerosols. When these eventually fell back to Earth, they caused widespread acid rain. They could hide, they could eat what little food was available, and their metabolic needs were far lower than a multi-ton dinosaur. Their sheer size was their downfall. They needed too much food, their metabolisms were too high, and their reproductive cycles were likely too slow to rebound in such a devastated world. The ecosystem that had sustained them for so long had vanished overnight. It was a perfect storm of disaster, an instant catastrophic blow followed by a prolonged, unlivable period of darkness, cold, and starvation. Many freshwater creatures also fared better, as water can buffer against temperature extremes and provide some protection from atmospheric fallout, though acid rain would still have been a challenge. Scavengers, those that could feed on the abundance of dead organisms in the immediate aftermath, might have initially thrived, but even their food source would eventually disappear as the larger carcasses decomposed. Imagine rain so corrosive it could strip leaves from trees, acidify lakes and rivers, and dissolve the shells of marine organisms. This would have been particularly devastating for freshwater and marine ecosystems, further crippling the food chain from the bottom up. The age of dinosaurs, which had spanned some 165 million years, concluded not with a whimper, but with an earth-shattering bang and a subsequent chilling silence that lasted for eons. The stage was cleared, violently, for the next act in Earth's story, paving the way for the rise of entirely new forms of life. Organisms with calcium carbonate shells, like many mollusks and the plankton that form the base of marine life, would have struggled to form or maintain their shells in increasingly acidic waters. It was a ripple effect, a domino cascade of starvation and death that swept across the globe. But what followed was a long, dark twilight, a prolonged period of environmental collapse that sealed the fate of the dinosaurs and countless other species. This was the true extinction event, a slow, suffocating death for a world that had thrived for millions of years. Landscapes would have been scarred by immense wildfires, leaving behind vast tracts of charred earth. The KPG extinction event, as it's known, wasn't 100% fatal to all life, just the vast majority. It was a selective killer. Generally, smaller, more adaptable creatures had a better chance. Animals that could burrow underground, sheltering from the initial heat pulse and the long dark winter, had an advantage. Animals with generalized diets, omnivores that could eat anything from seeds to insects to decaying matter, were more likely to find food in a collapse ecosystem than highly specialized feeders. Those species that managed to survive the initial impact and the subsequent winter would have found themselves in a dramatically altered, hostile world with severely depleted resources. Imagine, if you can, the global atmosphere immediately after the impact. This wasn't just a cloudy day. It was an impact winter. For months, possibly even years, sunlight would have been dramatically reduced, plunging the Earth into a chilling, perpetual gloom. Photosynthesis, the very engine of life that fuels plants, would have largely shut down. Without sunlight, plants couldn't grow. The vibrant, lush landscapes we pictured in Chapter 2 would have withered, died, and decomposed. Think of the base of the food chain. Annihilated. Algae and phytoplankton in the oceans, the foundation of marine ecosystems, would have collapsed, leading to a cascade of death through the water column. As the plants died, the herbivores that depended on them would have starved. Those massive triceratops and hadrosaurs, accustomed to grazing on abundant vegetation, would have found their food sources dwindling to nothing. A creature that big needs an immense amount of food every day. With the primary producers gone, they simply couldn't sustain themselves. Their vast numbers would have dwindled rapidly as hunger took hold. And of course, the predators, like T-Rex, that depended on the herbivores, would have faced a similar fate. But the darkness and cold weren't the only long-term killers. The environmental devastation was relentless. Even after the initial dust and soot settled, and some light began to filter through, the world that emerged was vastly different. So, who survived, and why? This explains why many small mammals, birds, lizards, snakes, and amphibians survived. The non-avian dinosaurs, those magnificent rulers of the land, simply couldn't adapt. The long twilight was a testament to the fragility of even the most dominant life forms when faced with a truly global catastrophe. Chapter 10, Echoes in Time, Legacy of the Lost Era. We've journeyed through the violent birth of a planet, witnessed the rise of colossal plants and majestic dinosaurs, felt the terrifying force of an asteroid impact, and endured the long, grim twilight that followed. Every T-Rex skeleton in a museum, every fossilized footprint found in ancient mud, every leaf impression in a rock. These are direct messages from that lost world. They allow us to reconstruct a time so distant, it's almost unfathomable, giving us a window into ecosystems, behaviors, and anatomical marvels that would otherwise be entirely lost to time. The layers of iridium, a rare element on Earth but common in asteroids, found globally at the KPG boundary, serve as a chilling geological marker of the event. The evolution of flowering plants, which was already underway in the late Cretaceous, accelerated as new ecological niches opened up. The evolution of birds, the surviving lineage of dinosaurs, continued its diversification, leading to the incredible avian diversity we see today. The very distribution of species, the composition of our forests, and the makeup of our oceans all bear the imprint of that mass extinction event. Remember the colossal forces that forged the Earth, the magnificent giants that roamed its surface, and the catastrophic moment that reshaped everything. The dinosaurs may be gone, but their legacy endures, whispering across millions of years, reminding us that our planet has an epic story, and we are but a fleeting chapter in its grand unfolding narrative. Their world may be lost, but its echoes resonate, forever shaping our present and informing our future. This layer, discovered in the late 1970s and early 80s, was the crucial piece of evidence that shifted scientific consensus from gradual extinction theories to the now widely accepted impact hypothesis. It taught us that our planet is not an isolated bubble. It is part of a larger cosmic shooting gallery. It informs our understanding of mass extinctions, climate change, and even planetary defense. By studying what happened 65 million years ago, we gain crucial insights into how ecosystems respond to rapid, dramatic environmental shifts, whether those shifts are caused by an asteroid or by human activity. It's a powerful lesson in interconnectedness and the delicate balance of life. And events in space can have profound, devastating consequences here on Earth. Paleontology, the science of studying these ancient lives, continuously reshapes our understanding of evolution, adaptation, and extinction. These fossils are not just old bones. They are storytellers, whispering tales of giants and vanished worlds. From children's toys to blockbuster movies, they symbolize ancient power, lost worlds, and the awe-inspiring grandeur of nature. They ignite our curiosity about deep time and our place within Earth's long evolving story. They remind us of the impermanence of even the most dominant life forms and the incredible resilience of life itself. They teach us humility in the face of geological time and cosmic events. The story of Earth 65 million years ago is one of immense power, astonishing life, and catastrophic change. But this isn't just a historical anecdote, a fascinating chapter from a bygone era. Suddenly there were vast, empty landscapes, abundant resources, and no enormous competitors. This was the opportunity mammals had been waiting for tens of millions of years. Within a geologically short period, they underwent an explosive adaptive radiation. evolving into an incredible array of forms, from tiny shoe-like creatures to large herbivores, swift carnivores, and eventually the primates from whom we descended. Without the KPG extinction, it's highly unlikely that mammals would have ever risen to global dominance. And thus, our own existence is a direct consequence of that cataclysmic day 65 million years ago. We are, in a very real sense, children of the impact. The lost world of the dinosaurs and its dramatic end has left an indelible mark on our planet, shaping the very world we inhabit today and profoundly influencing our understanding of life itself. The echoes of that lost era are still all around us, if we only know where to look. Perhaps the most obvious legacy is the sheer volume of fossil evidence. But the legacy goes far beyond the fossil record. The KPG extinction event, brutal as it was, created an immense ecological vacuum. For 165 million years, non-avian dinosaurs had occupied most of the large terrestrial niches. When they vanished, the playing field was suddenly violently leveled. This allowed for the spectacular and rapid diversification of the small, unassuming creatures that have survived, the mammals. Imagine the world after the extinction event. The dominant predators and herbivores were gone. The event also profoundly impacted the Earth's geology. The Chicxulub crater itself is a permanent scar on the planet, a testament to the immense power of extraterrestrial impacts. Furthermore, the extinction of so many species reshaped evolutionary trajectories in ways we can only begin to grasp. Beyond the scientific, there's the cultural legacy. Dinosaurs have captured the human imagination like few other creatures. And what about the future? The KPG event stands as a stark reminder of the potential vulnerabilities of life on Earth. So, when you look up at the night sky, or walk through a forest, or even just ponder the incredible diversity of life around you, remember that lost era.